everybody. This is me, Bishop John Selders, and I am godly proud and pleased and happy to be coming to you. Listen, I'm calling this a special episode because it ain't on a Monday, right? I would tell people all the time, the name of our organization here in Connecticut is Moral Monday CT. So it might be that when we do a thing, it might happen on a day of the week that has something to do with, you guessed it, Monday. But I thought it was so important for us to jump on and have some conversation this evening after, well, we're going to get into it in a minute. But I wanted to talk to somebody that I know and love, who is family to me. And I wanted to have some conversation with somebody who would understand the prerequisite, what it means to have a Black man hold the Senate, the well of the Senate floor for over 24 hours. And it was only, listen, it wasn't with one person I wanted to chop it up with. And it's my brother, my friend. Let me just say he's fulfilled all the requirements that it has, that is needed to have been a successful pastor, still is a pastor, and to have graduated from being a pastor to becoming he was a politician for a little while. He was doing that for a minute, ran for office and stuff, and then moved, took on a national position, and started pastoring another church. Lord have mercy, he one pastor in 14 locations. How about that? Bishop? and then I've been privy to watch his journey for, man, it's been 20 years plus now, I guess. And to call he and his family part of my family, and I part of his family, and to now he has risen to be the executive director of the largest faith-based grassroots organizing network in the country. And maybe, can we say this out loud? It might be in the world. I don't know. It might be in the world. But this now international grassroots network of leaders and faithful folk. And I get to call him my brother, my family, my friend, no other than Bishop Dwayne David Royster. Come on, join this platform and greet the peoples.
Greetings, Bishop. Thank you so much for that very, very wonderful introduction. I deeply appreciate that. I was just sitting here thinking a little while ago, there was a handful of bishops that laid hands on me when I became a consecrated bishop. My bishop, Bishop Kermit Newkirk, the late Bishop Kermit Newkirk, and now the late Bishop Donnie Graves, and a lot of those folk have passed on who were there that day. But I'm grateful that you're still here with us, and I call you a brother and a friend, an elder brother in the work, and I deeply appreciate you, and thank you so much. And hello to all your listeners out there. It's good to be back here with you again. I love getting together and just talking about faith, politics, ethics, and everything else that's going on, because we're busy trying to change the damn world because there's too many people waking up every morning feeling like they're already living in hell. So we're trying to get it together.
That's exactly right. I appreciate you too. The love goes both ways. And I was just referencing with my beloved, I turn around and I'm one of few that remember stuff, or I can make the claim I was there, or I knew them folk, or et cetera, et cetera. And so I am looking forward to the opportunity I am going to take to do some writing, do some reflecting about these, what I'm going to call transition moments, these inflection points. I now can make the claim, and it's a true claim. I remember legalized segregation in this country. Sure. I remember riding in the back of the bus. I remember the separate water fountains as we traveled from what we call the North up here. Because I'm in New England, they call where I'm from, St. Louis, the South. But anyway, they're misunderstood. They're misguided. They're misguided. We not the South. We the Midwest. But I've had to own the fact that living here, where I'm from, we got all the Southern roots and all the Southern ways. So to own the fact that I can speak bilingual English. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of English I can speak. Only people who know it know what we mean, right? So I was just telling some colleagues. I was saying to somebody the other day, my grandmother would have called some of these times. She would the old people would have said it like this. The old people where I come from, they say, "Son, the war is full of hatred and jealousy." Now I know what they mean. And I think when you hear that, you know what I mean, but you ain't from that. So it's only a certain group of people that when I say that, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And you one of them. I appreciate you very much. And I want to get started by just referencing as we share this afternoon. We just came out of a 24-hour period where our colleague, our brother and friend to some of us, certainly leading Democratic leader, took to the well of the Senate floor and held the space for 25 hours and 5 minutes and some seconds. Started out on Monday night and sat down on Tuesday night. Yeah. And can I just say for some of us, for many of us, he expressed, of course, he walked through what I think are the salient points and spent time in, as I've listened over the course of today, some of what he had to say. And so he did a very fine job in setting up and walking us through. But he also spoke from his heart. And I've heard some this and that from every which way. Everybody got opinions, and okay, everybody got opinions. But can I say he was doing something, and he was doing something creative, man? And I like the fact he was a Black man doing it. It just felt something felt right by him taking the floor. And can you just let's lead off by jumping into this remarkable historic moment. He wasn't filibustering, so they got that wrong. Mainstream media, y'all got that wrong. That wasn't a filibuster. This was a speech that took 25 hours.
Yes, the longest speech in recorded history that's ever taken place. The senior senator from the state of New Jersey, Senator Cory Booker, took to the floor to disrupt the activities of the U.S. Senate based on the fact that he is in deep disagreement with the authoritarianism that's coming out of the Trump White House and out of Elon Musk DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. And he and several colleagues, we have to say Cory Booker was the main guy, but there were a lot of senators that surrounded him, Democratic senators that surrounded him in that place. That got in conversation with him to give him a chance to breathe and think and process, and stood up and took over the U.S. Senate so that they could not do any business for over a day, so that he would make a statement to the country about the evil that we are experiencing right now. At some point, somebody's got to stand up, at least in the halls of government, and do something about it. I also think it's very powerful that in the place where it sort of felt like the Senate caved during the fight around the reconciliation bill, for Cory Booker to step up, Senator Cory Booker to step up and hold the Senate's floor and hold that space as an act of resistance, I think was a very powerful statement to the rest of the country. And I agree with you in that it was powerful for a Black man to do that. Honestly, we've gotten a lot of grief because some of our brethren have slid over to the other side. only 80% of us voted for Kamala Harris, right? So we've gotten grief from the 92% that are like, where were y'all at? Even though we were the second highest group that voted for Kamala Harris, we need to be clear about that. But I think it was also a way of providing a covering for the country. We know Cory Booker is a deep man of faith. And I think that this was a way for him to provide cover for his community and for the people that he loves and care about for New Jersey. And for all the people in America who are in despair in this moment because of what is happening in the executive branch of government. Well, actually, I should say it's the executive branch, it's the legislative branch, and it's the Supreme Court at the same time. We got problems with all of it. The federal courts are jacked up. The legislative branch is jacked up. The executive office is jacked up. And then we got this extra presidential role of Elon Musk that's just messing everything up. So, yeah, we got all this stuff that's going on at the same time. And people are in a level of despair. And so I think he kind of came in and stepped in at a very powerful moment to be able to draw attention back to this country and say, this is not our better selves the way we are right now. There is a better way that we are able to live our lives. And over the last 25 hours, he laid that vision out.
I was amazed. First off, of course, I was, providing, I do a little tent making on the side. And so I'm in, I'm doing the work at the college, and I my phone pings, and there are back to back notifications of something going on at Congress. And so I checked in when I had a moment, and to see that he was holding forth in a very, very powerful, very, very informative, and very, very needful way. Mm-hmm. And I have been a little bit taken back, and I don't mind saying this in this platform and to you, that the opposition party mm-hmm. has felt a bit flat-footed. The mm-hmm. response to all, listen, it's just a little over 2 months, right? They just got in there, and the amount of chaos that has just covered the wide array of issues, concerns, and stuff, and folk, and firing folk, and ripping it up. I'll say it in my vernacular, ripping it up, burning it down, just going at it. And I just have felt, okay, they're gonna do it because they, I know how our politics works in one part. In one end, if you count the votes. Listen, if you got the votes, you get what you want. But here we are, we're governing by executive order, which somehow or another, something like that just doesn't work right for me. But not only are we governing, we're just out and out decreeing and declaring as if we are king, as if there is some, that's tyranny. That's tyranny to me. That's some might call it fascism, and it's just much of it. Yeah, and much of it is not legal. How in the world you just go by a vote of Congress? Budgets are created, mm-hmm. Allocations are made. There's a whole group, a whole committee that sorts through what they're going to put together as a overall budget. They propose it, right? Different states call it different things, appropriations. That's what they call it in the federal context. And they work out the deeds, and then they bring it to the House and the Senate, and then they vote, and they can be different, then they have a reconciliation meeting. This is our form of governance, right? And you just gonna summarily in crayon, just gonna write your name on it, and then it be what? And so I'm there was a bit of me just happy to say And one of my friends characterized it this way, ain't nobody's mouth the prayer book, even mine. Right? So it's stuff I said, I'll go like, wait a minute, I don't even believe what I just said. So you gotta sort that all out. Corey, the senior senator of New Jersey, has done some things. I go like, hold on. And yet here, he grabbed some courage and did, some preparation and took to the floor. All right. He wasn't reading from no encyclopedia. I've witnessed several of them take this encyclopedia and just go to read as if we needed to, this was thoughtful. There was preparation made. And then several moments, as I've witnessed, he just spoke from his heart. These weren't prepared. He just spoke from his heart. And so I think, a mad applause to our brother for standing there. And you're right. There are a number of people who were there with him. I got to give props to Connecticut. So our senator, he's probably the leader of our delegation down in Washington, D.C. Senator Chris Murphy was standing right there with him. He was one of the last people that took to it from the opposition side. And walked them through, from what I understand, the first 15 hours, they were right there neck and neck together, cheering and applauding him and supporting him in all the ways he needed to be supported. And I appreciate very much many of the folk who have had things to say. Oh, I've been checking out the socials. So, folk been talking, and I've heard great opinions and I've heard not so great opinions about all of it. And now I'm registering my kudos, my applause, my thumbs up, my let's get at it, y'all. You gotta, listen, I'm not gonna knowingly, you don't like me, hand you the weapon to take me out. I'm not gonna knowingly do that, right? So if in fact you're gonna take me out, you're gonna have to find your own weapons and you're gonna have to use your own resources to get it done. I'm not gonna help you, by standing still. First off, I am going to run. Mm-hmm. I am going to find cover, and I'm gonna zigzag my way to that cover. Right. So I'm not going to do that. And for the life of me, I can't understand what y'all mean. If you got the votes, vote on it. Vote it. I mean, you've been around these political circles long enough. If you're big enough and bad enough to put it out there, call the question. Let's go.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that for a minute, right? So the chaos that we have been experiencing, that Senator Booker's pushing back against, it was laid out for us a couple of years in advance. Project 2025 was available for download on the internet. The Heritage Foundation had it on their website. All you had to do was go download. Now, granted, it was 900 something pages, but it told you everything that they were going to do. The white supremacist, white Christian nationalist. I don't even want to say they're conservatives, because true conservatives in many ways do not even act like this. Real conservatives do not agree with many things that the Trump administration is doing. There are real Republicans that are like, I don't know who this guy is and what he's doing, but this is not what our party is all about. But the crowd that he is with, the apartheid loving, South African, Elon Musk and others that he is aligned with, they basically laid out what they were going to do. And they had 4 years to strategize about how to make it happen. And so when they came in, it was my understanding, from what I've heard from folk in the DC area, was that they came in basically with 200 executive orders pre-written coming in the door. And it was just a matter of time for them to be able to release them. They were going to do things that they knew were going to be challenged in court. But Trump got the court that he wanted so that he could, he's losing in the district courts, the district federal courts. We have to explain that there are levels of federal courts, right? District, there's appellate division, and then you eventually get up to the Supreme Court. There's about 4 or 5 different divisions. He's losing in a district division. Now, watch what he does. He says, I don't like district justices that rule against me. We should get rid of them. What does Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, the congressman from Louisiana, say? We're thinking about writing out certain district courts so that they don't have the power to make unilateral decisions for what happens in the rest of the country. Anyway, he's appealing everything because this is what Trump always does. He goes to court and he works to exhaust people to the point that they drop out. And so they're going to continually run things up to the Supreme Court. Now, he put Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett on the court, along with John Roberts, who's a conservative, was put on there by Bush. And then there's Clarence Thomas that is on there as well. And I think, if I remember correctly, Sam Alito's still there. And then you have Elena Kagan. I'm thinking Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor are the three progressives that are on the court right now, right? So you have a 6-3 split. So he could even lose one of the conservatives, which he's been losing Amy Coney Barrett, who in many ways is like, yeah, some of this stuff doesn't fly, right? But everybody else is lined up and standing with him. So we are in a situation. I just tell the story real quick. So in the last month, like you mentioned earlier, Faith in Action National Network is one of the largest faith-based organizing networks, not only in the U.S., but in the world. We actually are in 26 United States in America, and then we are in 12 countries outside the U.S. where we do faith-based organizing. In the last month, I spent 10 days in Ghana, and then I spent 8 days in El Salvador. And El Salvador was particularly important because they live in an authoritarian government. And so I actually spent some time there with folk on the ground, poor folk who are working and fighting against the government right now to be able to get rights and the things that they need, and they're actually winning. And it was kind of helpful to be in that space because they're a few years ahead of us in terms of what their government's doing, that there's ways to be able to win. But it was a reminder to me that what Trump is doing is basically lining everything up so that he doesn't really have to work too hard at getting what he wants. And even we should also say that he owns in many ways the fourth estate. For those that don't know what the fourth estate is media. And so they've been using the bully pulpit of the press room in the White House to kick out normative agencies like the AP, like other, traditional media sources, kicking them out and basically saying, if you don't say good things about us, we're not letting you back in, right? This is all authoritarian. It's fascist in every sense of the imagination. It is totally about a dictatorship. And so for Cory Booker to stand up in this moment, making himself, now he was already an object, a Black man in the U.S. Senate, you're an object, right? You are a target. But he made himself even more of a target because he, without a shadow of a doubt, is challenging the Trump administration. So let's talk about the fact, okay, there are people that critique Cory Booker. Cory Booker is a moderate. He's not a progressive. Never been a progressive. He's a moderate. But he's a Black moderate, which is a little different because we kind of do things a little bit differently. We're progressive on some stuff. We're a little bit, more conservative on some other things. And I know that there are people in Jersey, because I've heard from some of my folk in Jersey, they're sort of like, well, there's a bunch of things that he didn't do or could have done when in Jersey that he did not do. I get it. But he used the platform that he had to make a statement about this moment that took courage, that I am sure that the white supremacists and the white Christian nationalists are going to try to find more ways to come at him because he elevated his profile in the midst of doing this. It is a reminder to each and every one of us that we have a moral obligation to resist in whatever form or fashion we have against tyranny, against authoritarianism, and against white supremacy in any shape or form. And it doesn't matter who you are, you can take some step, whether it's joining the boycott against Target or Amazon, whether it is making sure that you're talking to your young people and getting them prepared to vote in the next election, prayerfully their votes will count in that election, right? Or, even helping them understand what it means to become civically engaged. Can we do some training for people about how the three branches of federal government actually work? Because after you go to high school, unless you take, American history classes in college, you're not learning this stuff, right? So how are we having conversation with folk and preparing them for that? And so I think that there's a lot of work to be done on that. But then I think there's also a part that's unique for people of faith in this moment. And Cory Booker, I think, in many ways, not only was he showing up as a senator, but I think he was showing up as a prophet at the same time. And prophets don't always have to be ordained and hands laid on them to speak prophetically, right? It can be a one-off event. But I think he was speaking prophetically to our country. And it's a real challenge for people of faith and moral courage in this moment to find the prophetic voice, and not just the voice, because the voice is not enough. You've got to step into space and time and to help people get recentered in this moment that we're living in and get active. We've got to get people active. And there's a big action happening on April 5th this week across the country. Thousands of actions are taking place as a day of resistance. Yes, that's one way to do it, but there are plenty of other ways to be able to do that as well.
You're absolutely right, Bishop. I thank you. And of course, let me just say, I'm jealous you traveling all over the world. Next one of them next trip, listen, I can carry a bag. Listen, I still know how to be an armor bearer. Listen here. And I can talk on it myself. So consider what I've just asked. Anyway, listen, you've said a couple of things that I think are meaningful in this moment. One, that we don't always have, we don't have to occupy the same lanes. There are many approaches to what I'm calling activation, right? There just are. We can do a lot of things in this moment. But I want to say, before we even get there, the fear that I hear in faith folk, their hair is on fire, and that's how I've been describing it. And yeah, there are things that, every day I come home, from a tent making job and then go, what? So there's the flame on, hair on fire moment. And then I remember what the scriptures say. That y'all let me be a preacher just for a few moments. Mm-hmm. God has not given us the spirit of fear.
Yes, sir.
But a power and love and of a sound mind. And when I hear power, of course, that's the ability to act. Love. I hear Dr. King every day. As he dreamed a bit in his last book. Where do we go from here? The beloved community. What might that mean? And the global house is what he framed it. In his book. And then sound mind. I hear strategy. Mm-hmm. I hear action that's just not. I'm not just mad, or I'm not just upset, or I'm not just out here because I need to rail against something. And I think there's value in that in time and place. But if I'm gonna get out there with my age now, and I done some years, I done some work. I ain't been missing an accident. I've been out here, and so I need to do things that are strategic, that have a goal, that have a target, and that have an end to it. I want change to come, and I love your phrase, change the damn world. And so I want to do some of that, and there are multiple ways to do that. And so you see me out there on the block. If I'm out there in them streets, I'm out there. The thing I'm doing is angling for victory. All right, and so for us, I'm absolutely in alignment with that. That some of us need some work around just how Congress works, just how our form of government works. And let me just say this right here. I'm in Connecticut. We ain't broke. If the federal government don't give Connecticut a quarter, I ain't gonna say the rest of it. I ain't gonna say the rest of it. All right, so what that then means is go ahead and do what you're gonna do. Go on, do what you're gonna do, DC. And then Hartford, capital city of Connecticut, what we gonna do? And so what I've said to folk here in Connecticut, there's multiple prongs of our effort. Yes, we need to be certainly in the ear of our congressional delegation. And by the way, let me just say this while I'm ranting. Let me just say this right here. Congressman Himes, your vote against Representative Al Green? No, sir. No, sir. So for those of you who haven't seen already, we've called for community censure of Congressman Jim Himes. Go check our social media out if you want to find out more information about what we think is important. Here's another form of pushback, right? You got to get active and talk through what that pushback means. And I'll say this one other way, that there are ways in which our Dr. King walked from the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, was from Selma to Montgomery. It was a state march from a town to the capital city.
That's right.
I'm going somewhere if y'all let me be the preacher that I am. I'm suggesting that the work we got to do is at the house, is at home, it's where you live. Okay, the DOE, y'all gonna just tear it up and just eliminate it. I don't know how you do that legally, but that's what you're gonna do. Well, let's be clear. In fact, every school board I know is locally funded. So okay, they not gonna, money ain't coming from then what we gonna do? And quite frankly, let me look at the church. Schools got started by churches. Mm-hmm. The oldest school in this here Turtle Island is Harvard. That's the oldest school, and it trained preachers.
That's right.
Yeah. So we may have to get back to, and can I say this, and y'all don't get mad and shout me down? Just about every social service in this country got its start because faith folk took it on when the gap existed. Yep. So we may have to come back home.
Well, I mean, yeah, let me jump in. I mean, there's a couple of things you're saying in there really powerful. One, I do think that this is a moment when we have to renew community, and especially in a moment when Pew Research has just updated their report about faith, right? And the biggest group in the country is still the nuns, although the Catholics are starting to recover a little bit. The reality is that there are a lot of people that are still out there that are lonely, that are not connected. It was actually interesting in the last election, there were 90 million people that did not vote that eligible voters that did not vote in the election. And there was a profile done, I forgot which newspaper did it, but a profile. But if you actually look at the profile that they did of who the non-voter was in that 90 million, and you look at the people that are in the none category in the United States, they're the same people. And they're lonely, they're isolated, they don't feel like what they matter in the world, they don't feel deeply connected to the world, they don't think that they actually are able to make change. Actually, 90 million people voting in this election probably would have changed a lot about what happened in the election. And so I think that here's a couple of things, because I think that there's things people need to do, but I think we also need to understand what people are going through in this moment. There is, in theological terms, this term called ontology, which is the metaphysical aspect of being. It's about how you be in the world, about reality, how reality is around you. And Paul Tillich, the theologian, Reformed theologian, would have said that we are dealing with ontological shock. And I was actually talking to our dear brother and friend, Dr. Steve Ray. Steve and I were talking about this the other day. And, I was like, well, there's been a series of shocks. And I said, COVID was an ontological shock, right? The racial pandemic was an ontological shock, right? Reports have said AI is serving, like artificial intelligence is serving as an ontological shock. And for a lot of people, Donald Trump being reelected again serves as an ontological shock. Like the reality of like, how is this happening? And when we say ontological shock, what that ultimately means is that reality as people know it does not exist. And so part of what I think we've experienced, not only from the Democrats, but I think from people in general, including Trumpers now, Trump voters who are now looking and saying, oh my God, what did we do? there's a shock and awe that's happening in this space, and people are not grounded. They don't have grounding because their sense of reality is lost. Here is the power that we as people of faith have in this moment. First of all, if we actually take seriously our text, our sacred text, at least from the Christian tradition, we have both the Hebrew Bible and the Gospels, and then the epistles as we understand it, the history books are, Romans and Acts. Acts is a history book, and the apocalyptic book of Revelation. But if we actually go back and read the text and we take seriously the text, there's nothing new about what we're going through. There's nothing new about it. This has happened over and over and over again. If we go through the Hebrew Bible, if we go through the New Testament, even if we were to go into the Quran, we would see stories of these experiences existing over and over and over again throughout human history. The thing that makes faith powerful in this moment, and I'm not talking about white Christian nationalism faith or evangelical faith that's been perverted into an idealized form of white supremacy in this country, Americanized Christianity, which is not Christian at all. But what I'm talking about, people who are deeply faithful, that are the followers of the one who came into this world called Jesus, or even the ones who are followers of Moses, or the ones that are followers of Muhammad, the true followers of Muhammad, is that our faith tradition actually gives us the capacity to be able to see a reality that doesn't yet exist, and to see the manifestation of that reality in the here and the now. Which is why, as faith-based organizers, you and I both do this on a daily basis, right? As faith-based organizers, we're not ever caught up in the status quo, because the status quo, for all intents and purposes, is never good enough. So we're always striving for the next level of justice to occur. Which is why I often get frustrated with some of our colleagues that are in the pockets of some political leaders and things like that, as if that's the best that we can do. It's never the best that we can do. We can always do better. And we should always be pushing to do better and agitating to do better, and being like the prophets of old, whether it's Isaiah or Jeremiah or Nathan challenging David. We should be calling for something more than what we have in any given moment in time. And so in this moment, when people are in ontological shock and they're like, their whole world is just coming unglued. I read an article the other day, eggs are going to be $14 a dozen before the end of the year. Like, when we're in this place of ontological shock, how do we, as people of faith, ground people again? Help them to get rooted in something that might not yet exist. Faith is the hope, assurance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. How do we help people get grounded in that again? And then not just get grounded in it, but then how do we help them find their agency to be the hands and the arms and the legs and the feet of God, to go about bringing about the world that God wants, where all of us are able to flourish and thrive and live our full best lives? And instead of being stuck in the realm of the world that we're in, the shock and awe is designed to keep us on defense. It's designed to keep us from having imagination. It's designed to keep us from having hope. But in this particular moment that we're living in, this is a moment for us to have deep imagination, to have deep hope, and to see deep possibilities of a world that has never been, a country that has never lived up to its earliest documents, and to be able to find ways to be able to make that happen. As we say at Faith in Action, how do we become architects of a new America so that all God's children are able to thrive and flourish? And we can redefine faith. Faith is inclusive. Faith is welcoming. Faith is loving. Faith is liberating. Faith is freeing. Faith is empowering. How do we help people get to that place that they're actually able to live their full best lives? In many ways, Donald Trump might be doing us a favor, because he's tearing down the country that we're going to have to reconstruct. And can we reconstruct it better than it was before?
Well, listen. You got me. I'm in preaching mode right here. I thought about the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God to the pulling down of strong, vain imaginations and everything that might exalt itself against. Y'all see where I'm going. Any Christians in the house and anybody faithful, and let's be clear. I've been saying that we've been doing what we're calling these moral time sessions across the state. We've done 2 so far, and we are poised to do several more in the next few weeks. And one of the things I am saying unequivocally, we cannot, as followers of Jesus, abscond or just say we're not going to do what Jesus said. Matthew 25 is just as clear as can be. And so, I love that. I love that story, the story, the parable that Jesus recites to his disciples, and then the disciples go to dig it in their head. They're always scratching their head, asking questions, and I like questions. I think we ought to be poised to ask questions. They said, Jesus, when were you hungry? When were you naked? When were you in prison? We've been with you all the time. You ain't that John the Baptist went to jail, but when did you? And he then says, when you've done it to the least of these, right, you've done it to me. So we can't just somehow not get in the fight, not get in the struggle, not be somehow related to the work that's got to be done, right? And of course, I love Islam. I love the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because listen, one of their pillars, they got 5 of them. One of them is giving alms. They got to get into work. And of course, I love our Jewish brothers and sisters who we claim kinship with, right? I like that story about the wandering Aramean. So we can't just, the guest has to be the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't the riotous living that was going on. The sin, Jesus said, was the inhospitality, right? So and didn't we all come? Well, didn't some of the folk that came here come here, and there were people already here? So Columbus did not discover. He didn't discover. How you discover what people live? What? It was new to you, but it wasn't new. Right. So anyway, it's boggling my mind that we got our hair on fire, and what you've named is absolutely correct. There has to be a grounding, right? Walter Rodney, famous theorist, and certainly a prophet of his time, to me. Talked about these kinds of groundings that whatever our work is has to be rooted in something that one that can sustain us, but 2 that also feeds us, right? And for me, it is clear as I can see, faith folk, we got work to do before we start getting too deep. We ain't got to know every law. We don't. We got to find ways to feed folk, clothe folk, find some way to go visit some folk. When ICE go pick them up, some of us got to put the collar on and go on down there, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what, and we got just a few more minutes, and I appreciate very much you're a busy man traveling all over the world, everything, going to Ghana and thing. Leave me right here. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Listen, so here we are. We're in these moments. We're gathering folk, and certainly we're doing our part to do what we believe is what the will of God is for us in this moment, to ask folk to do the real work. My beloved says it like this, and we were talking about this the other day when we were in our session, that what we really must be engaged in is, what do we want to see in the world? Mm-hmm. Right? This groundedness can't be all out there somewhere. It starts right here. It starts with me. What is it that I want to see in the world? And quite frankly, that I want to see in the world, that I want to be in the world, that I want to strive to be in the world, then you start creating and co-creating, speaking those things that be not as though they were, right? You're right. So what? Let's talk for a moment. This kind of creative imagination Dr. King leaves us in that, where do we go from here? Community, chaos or community, right? He's starting to dream about, one, he's thinking about the nightmare. He's like, oh Lord, did I invite people into a house that's already on fire? That's a good question to ask, Dr. King. That's a good question to ask, right? But then that he in a moment of reflection, he espouses that to his buddy and friend Harry Belafonte. Man, I don't know, right? And so many of us, you and I talk that way, be like, what in the world? You have these moments, and then when clarity comes, your grounding starts to speak up. Then you start saying, man, we gotta choose community, and here's how we do it. Lastly, this is what I love about what Dr. King left us. The areas of work and responsibility. I got the book right here. Just so y'all, I got the book right here. I got the book. You know what he started talking about in the appendix of where do we go from here? He starts talking about 1968. Remember, this book was released posthumously. He had already been assassinated nearly 57 years ago in a few days. Education. That's the area. Employment. Rights. And what he's talking about are human rights. He's talking about citizens endowed with rights defined by law. Housing, right? This is Dr. King talking nearly 60 years ago, the very things we're talking about right now that they outlined in Project 2025 that they want to go at. I'm sorry, go right ahead, Bishop. Go.
No, all I was going to say is that, I want to take it all the way back to the beginning of the book. Genesis 1 says that the Spirit of God hovered over the deep, and the earth was formless and void. Something existed, but it was chaotic at best. And then God spoke. And I think in this particular moment, and I think Dr. King actually asked a good question: are we inviting people into a burning house? The answer to the question is yes. It's evident that yes, it's burning. But sometimes you got to let it burn to the ground so then you can start building it back up again. We say Faith in Action. Our job at this particular moment is to defend everybody that we can, to mitigate as much damage as possible. It's to build our base at the moment. And then when the moment comes, to take over and live into the new imagination of what this country and actually what this world is going to be. Because let's be honest, how America goes is how the rest of the world goes. It should not be that way, but it is that way. And so, how do we create order out of chaos? And that's really what we are trying to figure out in this particular moment. Dr. King saw it almost 60 some odd years ago. He could see it. I think that's the prophetic mind of his at work in that moment. I would dare say that there were other religious writers and prophets that would be able to say the same thing to us, that they saw this coming. If I could get secular but spiritual still at the same moment, Octavia Butler in the parable of the sower, in the parable of the talents, saw this in the late 80s and the early 90s when she was writing those books, including the fact that there would be a president that would come along and say, make America great again, and then the destruction that would happen in the country. There's possibilities in all of this. God has not forsaken us in the midst of all this. God is actually in the midst of it with us, empowering us and strengthening us to create a new order, to create a new world, to create a new way of being that is better than what has been there before. And Dr. King was laying that foundation. And not just Dr. King, there was a lot of other folk that were laying those foundations too. We can't really talk about SCLC without talking about SNCC and Ella Baker, right? We can't talk about that without talking about Fannie Lou Hamer. We can't talk about what happened with CORE and other organizations, and not just Black organizations like the NAACP and Urban League, but white organizations and brown organizations and others that were trying to live into this deeper idea of a better world that we could aspire to. And I think that that's what we're being called to in this particular moment. I was actually talking with somebody the other day, and I know we're almost out of time, but we kind of had the Sankofa thing going on, right? We're looking back a little bit to pull the things that we need from the civil rights movement, from the labor movement, from the abolitionist movement, from the women's suffrage movement, from the various movements that have existed in this country to be able to move forward. But we can't bring all of that stuff forward because this time is different. And so now we've got to be able to step into this space and take up our space to be able to live into a new story. In much the same way that Senator Cory Booker took space up in the US Senate and spoke for 25 plus hours to take out the historic speech of Strom Thurmond, who was fighting against civil rights and fighting against equality of folk of color in this country, to a man of color who was standing up and saying, nope, our new imagination is a world where all of us are able to live fully, that there's equity, that there's equality, that there's decency and respect in this world, and that our better days are yet in front of us if we would lean in together as a nation to become our better selves. And so with that, that's the hope and the dream that we're living into in this moment. And as Dr. King asked the question, where do we go from here? Well, we're going to stand on his shoulders and the shoulders of so many others who have come before us to be able to build the world that they were imagining, that all of their children, Black and white and Asian and Hispanic and Native American and biracial and triracial and everything else, will be able to join together and sing that old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last.
Listen, you did a nice close right there. Let me put a coda on it. Let me put a coda on it. You know, the musician in me got to put something on it. You mentioned and you called the roll. We mentioned Dr. King, but you can't forget Ella Baker and SNCC. You can't talk Ella Baker without Fannie Lou Hamer, sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, there were, you can't talk Birmingham without Fred Wiggles.
Shuttlesworth, yeah, Shuttlesworth.
I'm sorry. There's a woman that we don't reference at all. There would not have been a March on Washington in 1963 if it had not been for Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Now, a lot of people don't know who Anna Arnold Hedgeman was, but she was the woman under the prior administration, under the prior Kennedy administration. All right, there was a commission that was pulled together, a civil rights commission. Anna Arnold Hedgeman was on that commission. She was a educator and a writer. And was a leader. And you had labor, right? So we had labor, because remember, the March on Washington was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, right? So you had labor organizers, Baird Rustin in the midst of that, because the power broker said Baird is the best organizer we got. And Martin, you all right with that? But none of it would have happened had it not been Anna Arnold Hedgeman, who was the one that had her hands on all the camps and pulled all the players together. A. Philip Randolph, Whitney Young, and folk want to say, they was all kissing cousins. Well, not so much. Not so much. There was strivings, and there was differences of opinion. Yet there was a person strong enough who had the moral character and the moral courage to say, we got an opportunity, we got a moment to pull it to come together. You're absolutely right. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael said, listen, we argued with some of the old heads. Now, it's funny to me, they all was all young. They all were young people, but all the old heads, right? We argued with him, but when it came to Dr. King, he could bring the crowd and he could bring the media. So we had to fall in, right? And fall into leadership, because Dr. King also, he had the ability to raise money. So again, strategy. Organizing takes, you got to do a bit of thinking, and you got to do a bit of organizing, and a little more thinking, a little more strategy work, a little more conversation. You got to build, base build, and then boom, when it's time to mobilize, when it's time to get active, when it's time, then we got to figure out how we gonna get active. We can't just be running every which way. We got to there got to be some captains. There got to be some marshals. If we're gonna hit the streets, some people gonna have to. If we, God forbid, we get arrested, somebody gonna have to. I think one time we was together. You came to get me from the jailhouse one time. Woo, down there in Washington D.C. So we got this moment, and you made me remember that there are many are called, few are chosen for this moment. And it was our sister who told Uncle Mordecai, in that moment, Uncle Mordecai was the prophet. Said, girl, you in the king's house for such a time as this, right? And here we are. We in this moment. And I believe this with all my heart, that we're gonna be the people leading and voicing and leading in courageous ways. How do we right side what has gotten all the way twisted up? And it's been coming for a while. That make America great again was a line and a phrase used as they were recovering initially from Reconstruction. When an election went wrong, after 10 years of us trying to right side it, they had enough, and they was gonna make it. They're gonna take it back. And the election of Rutherford B. Hayes did it, and they pulled the Union Army out of the South and re-coordinated, Jim and Jane Crow, which is what we call it today. And then 10 years later, put some law on it, separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson, right? And here we are now in this moment with this moniker again, "Make America Great." When was it ever? But and when was it ever? Yeah, I don't know. And yet here we are asking ourselves, what is required of us? And this moment, you've hit it out the park, Bishop. That it is this such a time moment that we've got to enter it sober minded, but also Dr. King would say we need to pray on it.
Yes,
right?
sir.
We need to get our spiritual rootedness, right? And figure out what said the Lord, and that's what I've asked faith folk to do, not just run around here, hair on fire, and okay, hair on fire, and right. So, lastly, here in Connecticut, on Friday, April 4th, it is the observance of the day Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. I am ever mindful he was in Memphis because he was doing the Lord's work in and around labor and workers, right? Sanitation workers were being subjected to horrible working conditions, and several of them had died in recent months. And it went down at the behest of several other folk. And his crew said, "Martin, we trying to do this other work. We trying to do this poor people's campaign. What you going down to Memphis for?" And then he goes down to Memphis, and we all know the story. So here in Connecticut, we've been involved for the last number of years with observing that day in particular. And so we will be gathering at Emmanuel Church in Hartford, Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Hartford, directly catacorner from the Legislative Office Building and the Capitol, the state capital of Connecticut. And we call it a preach-in. And so we have a slate of preachers from all over the state and all of the region, in fact, who will be coming together. We will be Muslim, we will be Jewish, we will be Christian, and we got some UUs in there, and they some everything. And I rank among them. I'm a UCCer. And they tell me we consider Christ every now and then, right? And it is a moment where we get to reflect a moment about Dr. King.
That's right.
And for us, the model and example of what a moral leader looks like in part, but also in the same breath take on what are the issues of our day. And we knew going in that education was going to be an issue. We knew going into this
Yeah.
that immigration was going to be an issue in this. We knew going in that there are people who are not getting their fair share as far as money and pay and healthcare. And so let's do that work. We start at 1 o'clock on Friday. So if you're in Connecticut, I don't care where you are or if you're in the region, that's going to be a space we will gather together. Check out social medias. Check our website, Connecticut, Monday-CT.org. Somebody stole a thing, so we got to change it. Anyway, that's crazy. But check our socials, check where we are, and on in the internet and find more information. Bishop, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You in my heart, you know that, and I can call on you. You say yeah, and we figured it out. I appreciate you. Best to the fam and
Likewise.
and your work that is key and core and center to much of what we need to do as we change the damn world. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. God bless everybody. Peace in the Middle East. And I can't say hair grease. In fact, I don't know if I want peace if we don't get justice. So see what I'm saying? Even my mouth ain't no prayer boogie. I say that stuff and then I'll be like, I don't know if I need justice first, and then maybe we will have peace. Because I hear the chat, no justice,
no peace.
All right, out of here. Blessings, y'all. Peace.